Over the centuries, Zayrek's school became a mosque. The district became quite poor. The mosque sold off its great white shining marble pillars and put in these baulks of stone instead. And the great screen, the altar screen from the church, whose golden panels now stand on the high altar of St. Mark's in Venice, were turned into that, a minbar, a pulpit for reading the Quran. So it all seems to have gone, doesn't it? But there's still something here. If you lift the carpets of the mosque and go through to the ancient floor underneath, then you'll see a memory of imperial Byzantium. There are still descendants of the Byzantines today, a dwindling community at the ancient heart of one of the largest cities in the modern world. Their worship in this sole-surviving ancient church is guaranteed by the proclamations of ancient sultans hanging on its walls. Their church has survived schism and poverty. For a while, the deep distrust of Rome led them towards Calvinism. But here they are still, in their holy city, with their own faith. Scattered too, through myriads of monasteries and far-flung churches, pale shadows of the ancient earthly empire of Byzantium. Most of Constantinople's ancient churches, though, were soon converted into mosques. This little mosque was once a chapel in the ancient palace of Byzantium. Endowed with lands and properties, these converted churches were transformed into self-financing charitable trusts, the religious and financial centres of the city's neighbourhoods, and the means by which Constantinople was converted to Islam and revived. Under Turkish rule, Constantinople was to become a rich and thriving city once again, the centre of a mighty empire, just as it had been 1,000 years before. Just before the conquest of Constantinople, a radical young bishop called Bessarion, Plethon's most brilliant pupil, had returned to Italy and had been made a cardinal of Rome. Some historians detect his portrait in this tragic bearded figure talking with Italian friends, chic young men of the Renaissance, painted by Piero della Francesca. Here at Rome, Bessarion did what Byzantines had done at Constantinople for centuries. He made a villa by the city walls. This villa, one of the first in the modern Western world. A memory of old Byzantium. Bessarion spent his life making a memorial for Byzantium by founding an academy of scholars. No, I suppose Bessarion bought his academy here when it got very hot in the summer months. This academy was a group of people who he'd gathered around him. Some were exiled Byzantines, many of them were Europeans, but everybody who could help him hold the identity of Byzantium together for as long as possible. Poets, artists, writers, translators, all sorts of people. Couldn't have been that difficult to find people, because this was a really fashionable idea. Dear old Platon had introduced Plato to the West. The Renaissance was beginning. This is early Renaissance building. For a few years, this was the coolest place on the planet. So you've got to think, perhaps, that this was the place too where one day in the summer 1452, Bessarion sat down to write to Mistra. He was writing a letter of condolence to Platon's sons. The old man had died with the spring flowers in June of that year. Bessarion wrote a letter, such a letter. He said that Platon had been his teacher, his father and his friend. It was one of the last authentic letters of the ancient world. After that, Byzantium became something to be seen in libraries and museums. Above all, Bessarion preserved the dream. He gathered the pure air of Mistra, the ideals of Constantinople, the energy of ancient wisdom, and made a single beauteous image of that most complicated empire. Bessarion was an enabler, a producer, a preserver of ideas and images, the assembler of the largest Byzantine library the world has ever seen. A collection whose fragments are still stored in the great libraries of the West. The man was Mr. Byzantium. He supported huge numbers of fellow exiles. He also used to place refugees all over Europe in jobs. This is a handmade Greek text of Homer's Iliad, made by a refugee from Mistra. And in the front of this beautiful volume is a picture of Homer wearing a Byzantine hat. The West had seen nothing like this flood of wisdom that was pouring from Byzantium. Homer, ancient Roman law, and a myriad of other texts. And they'd seen nothing like Bessarion's academy. Part of the modern world, its science and its scholarship, was started by these exiles from Byzantium. Platon and Bessarion first taught the West old Plato's heady individualism that so fills the modern world. Bessarion, too, told a Westerner about an ancient text that inspired Columbus to sail west from Europe on the east wind to America. There is, though, a deeper and yet more fundamental legacy. A vision of a universal order that stretches back through Byzantium, through Roman Greece to the Bible and the most ancient East. A vision that still fills the world today. A vision that exiled Byzantine artists drew out for us in dazzling detail at Voronezh, the most beautiful of Romania's lonely monasteries. See that cross there in the middle? That's the cross of our Lord standing on the holy throne of Byzantium, the center of the world. To the left is good, paradise. There's all the lords and ladies of Byzantium pressing through the pearly gates. On the right, hell, the Turks and everybody else, all the bad people struggling to get out. Good and bad, plus and minus, past and future, with heaven above and hell below, and pure energy at the center. A structured universal order that the modern world still understands and uses every day. And if there's nothing there that you can see from the modern world, just look at those demons, as black as SS officers, prodding their victims towards the ovens. That's a hell we made reality. And look at that over there, in paradise, the tree of life, the center of man's wisdom, the very plant that the god Gilgamesh 6,000 years ago in ancient Ur in Mesopotamia searched for. To him, the elixir of life was understanding. For us, perhaps, it's penicillin. Then again, there's something here that's unique. Above all the bustle of the world, the lords and ladies, the gods and demons, coming through and behind the very scroll of time itself, the Lord of the universe. The heart of the atom, heaven's order in a grain of sand. Byzantium's fundamental legacy, this image of a universal structure, a universal order, is as basic to the order of the modern world as is DNA to every individual in it. Nowadays, Constantinople, the heart of old Byzantium, is called Istanbul, an old Byzantine phrase that simply means the city. Inside the modern city, though, the past is disappearing. Ruins are often melancholy, but they should seldom make you angry. The end of Byzantium wasn't really brought about by the wicked West or the terrible Turk. Things pass, as the poet said. If the cowboys had never shot the Indians, the Great Plains would not be filled with shining teepees and herds of buffaloes. Nonetheless, we should honor the past and cherish it. It's a memory, a solid memory of our beginnings. And think of Byzantium too, as a flash of silver, as a dream of jewels. There's an image of a god sitting on a golden throne and of an emperor sitting in this palace in his imitation. Think of the culture that gave us the rule of Roman law, and the image of a holy mother, much beloved, caressing a baby child. And think of Byzantium too, this extraordinary empire set between the East and West, whose very ending set those two things far apart, but in whose own time gave so many good ideas to both of them. When sailing from Byzantium, listen to the city's fading sounds. Visit in your mind its golden images and all the shadows of its history. And as you wave goodbye, you'll discover that you can never really leave the past behind.